Everyone knows Vertigo as Hitchcock's masterpiece, but there's one scene that secretly changed how movies are made forever. Most people missed it completely. This wasn't the famous staircase moment or the dream sequence. It was something much more subtle, something that every major director copied for the next 60 years. Spielberg used it in Jaws. Scorsese put it in Goodfellas. Even Marvel movies rely on this technique today, yet film schools barely mention it. Today, we reveal what you missed. Alfred Hitchcock's fascination with the French writing duo Boileau and Narcejac started with a crushing disappointment that would change his career. In the early 1950s, he tried hard to buy the rights to their thriller, Celle qui n'était plus, She Who Was No More. He believed it was the perfect story for his style of exploring guilt, deception, and murder. But he lost the bidding war to French director Henri-Georges Clouzot. Clouzot turned the book into Les Diaboliques in 1955, a film many still consider one of the most terrifying ever made. For Hitchcock, the loss was more than professional. He had built his name on getting the best material, and losing to a European rival cut deep. The setback became the spark that pushed him to go after the duo's next work, with an intensity he had never shown before. His chance came sooner than anyone expected. In 1954, Paramount Pictures commissioned a synopsis of Boileau and Narcejac's novel, D'entre les morts, 2 years before the book was even translated into English. The English version, called The Living and the Dead, wouldn't appear until 1956, yet Hitchcock had already begun shaping the project based only on summaries. Paramount poured money into the idea without even waiting for the translation. A rare gamble at the time. The move showed how much faith the studio placed in Hitchcock's instincts. François Truffaut later said the novel had been written especially for Hitchcock, though Narcejac denied this. Still, the speed and certainty with which Hitchcock got the rights became part of his legend. The story's themes were a perfect match for Hitchcock's own past. During World War II, he had worked with British intelligence, making propaganda films and learning about psychological warfare and surveillance. The idea of secretly watching someone and questioning their true identity came directly from what he had seen during the war. The constant observation, the hidden truths, and the toll it took on the human mind all fed into Vertigo. Scotty Ferguson's obsession with watching Madeleine mirrored both the techniques Hitchcock had studied and the way he directed his actors. He was known for controlling every movement and detail, shaping them into the image he wanted, just as Scotty tried to reshape Judy into Madeleine. This connection grew even stronger when Hitchcock faced a major casting change. His chosen actress, Vera Miles, was under contract to him and had been carefully prepared for the demanding double role. She had starred in The Wrong Man in 1956 and appeared in his television series Alfred Hitchcock Presents. By November of that year, she was already doing makeup and hairstyle tests, and costume designer Edith Head was working on her wardrobe. Miles had even posed for the painting of Carlotta used in the museum scenes. But in March 1957, Hitchcock, recovering from gallbladder surgery, got the news that changed everything. Miles told him she was pregnant. It was her third pregnancy, with her husband Gordon Scott, best known as Tarzan. Hitchcock felt betrayed and claimed the decision ruined what he called her chance to become a great star. He was so angry that even 20 years later, he was still talking about the ingratitude, saying her departure had cost him several $100,000 in production delays and casting changes. To save the project, Hitchcock turned to Harry Cohn, the powerful head of Columbia Pictures, and secured Kim Novak. The deal was extraordinary for 1957. Columbia received $250,000 for lending Novak to Paramount, even though she herself was making only $1,250 a week at Columbia. The difference was staggering, almost 200 times her weekly pay. Despite the cost, Hitchcock was so sure she was right for the part that he didn't even ask her to take a screen test. For Columbia, the money was too good to refuse, even though Cohn reportedly disliked the script. But Novak was not willing to be used so easily. She loved the role. But when she saw Columbia taking $250,000 while she was earning only $250 a week, she refused to show up to set. It was a bold move for a young actress in 1957, when fighting the studio system could destroy a career. She hired new agents and demanded a fairer deal. Harry Cohn suspended her in retaliation, but with pressure from Paramount and Hitchcock's schedule, he eventually gave in. Novak's salary was raised to $3,000 a week, more than double what she had been making. She later told reporters, "I don't like to have anyone take advantage of me." Her stand was a sign of change in Hollywood, where stars were starting to push back against the old studio system. Even after the contract fight, Novak faced another battle, this time over her appearance. She told Edith Head that she didn't wear suits, she didn't wear gray, and she didn't wear black pumps. When Head passed that message along, Hitchcock made it clear he didn't care what Novak preferred as long as she wore a gray suit. He had pictured the exact look long before production, and nothing would change his mind. Edith Head later admitted it was one of the hardest assignments of her career, saying that dressing Novak for the film tested all her skill and psychology. Novak hated the outfit and told Hitchcock directly, but he insisted it was right for the role. He wanted her to feel uncomfortable in Madeleine's carefully constructed identity. Later, Novak admitted he had been right. She said, "As Madeleine, it didn't feel right, and that's what was right about it." The gray suit, unusual for a blonde, gave her an eerie look that was central to the film's unsettling mood. When Vertigo was first released in 1958, the reaction was far from what Hitchcock had hoped. Many critics tore it apart. The New Yorker's John McCartan dismissed it as far-fetched nonsense. Time magazine brushed it off as another Hitchcock and Bull story. Variety admitted Hitchcock's skill, but said the film was too long and slow, for what they called a psychological murder mystery. Philip K. Scheuer of the Los Angeles Times thought the story dragged and got lost in too many details. The New York Post went further, saying Hitchcock's smooth style made him think he could ignore logic and realism, and claimed the film would fall apart under close inspection. Even Bosley Crowther of the New York Times, who gave some praise, called The Big Secret devilishly far-fetched. Scholar Dan Auweiler later noted that these reviews set the tone for most critics at the time. In England, the reaction was even colder. Out of 28 reviews, 13 were almost completely negative. The harsh reviews carried over to the box office, and Vertigo became a shocking commercial disappointment. It brought in about $3.2 million in the United States, ranking only 21st for the year. Worldwide, the original release earned just 171,192s, with $158,085 of that from domestic showings. This was devastating for a movie that had cost about $2.5 million to make. It didn't even recover its budget, something unheard of for a Hitchcock film at that point. The negative word of mouth made things worse, and Paramount executives began to doubt whether Hitchcock could still guarantee box office success. For years, the film was seen as a failure and a low point in his career. It wasn't until re-releases beginning in 1983 that the film finally earned back its cost and started to be recognized for what it truly was. The Academy Awards added to the sting. Despite its groundbreaking style and technical daring, Vertigo received only 2 nominations at the 1959 Oscars, and both were in technical categories: Best Art Direction Set Decoration for Hal Pereira and Henry Bumstead, and Best Sound for George Dutton. Nothing for Hitchcock as Best Director, nothing for James Stewart or Kim Novak, and nothing for Best Picture. Even its groundbreaking cinematography, editing, and Bernard Herrmann's haunting musical score were overlooked. In a year when Gigi won Best Picture, the lack of recognition for Vertigo was especially painful. The film won neither of its 2 nominations, cementing its reputation at the time as one of Hitchcock's biggest disappointments. Yet out of this so-called failure came one of the most important technical revolutions in cinema, the dolly zoom. This effect was created through the collaboration of Hitchcock and Erman E. Roberts, a Paramount cameraman who never even received proper credit for the innovation. Known at the time as the trombone shot or contra zoom, it was developed from scratch in 1958, with no guidebook or precedent. Roberts' expertise with focal lenses and special camera equipment made it possible to pull off what Hitchcock had been chasing for nearly 18 years. Hitchcock had long wanted a shot that could capture the sensation of dizziness and disorientation, an idea he admitted was inspired by a night of heavy drinking at the Chelsea Arts Ball in London. He first tried to achieve it during the making of Rebecca in 1940, but the technology wasn't available yet. In Vertigo, Roberts finally made it happen. The effect worked by zooming the lens in while moving the camera back at the same time, keeping the subject the same size while the background stretched or compressed unnaturally. Achieving this required exact calculations and flawless timing, all done by hand in 1958, without the help of computers or motion control systems. In the famous staircase scene, Roberts carefully matched the zoom speed and camera movement to show James Stewart's fear of heights in a way no audience had ever experienced before. The result went beyond a camera trick. The dolly zoom made viewers feel the same disorientation as the character, triggering real sensations of vertigo. Studies later showed that it could cause the same reactions as acrophobia, including dizziness and nausea. For the first time, a movie wasn't just telling audiences how a character felt, it was making them feel it too. This changed the language of cinema. Spielberg used it in Jaws to show sudden terror, Scorsese in Goodfellas to create paranoia, and Peter Jackson in The Lord of the Rings to signal looming danger. It became the ultimate way to show shock, trauma, or revelation on screen. Alfred Hitchcock made one of the boldest moves of his career when he chose to reveal Judy Barton's secret identity about 2/3 of the way through Vertigo. At that moment, audiences learned she was the same woman who had pretended to be Madeline. Normally, thrillers saved such surprises for the very end, but Hitchcock broke that rule. The decision came during the screenplay adaptation, when writer Samuel A. Taylor added new dialogue and pushed for this revelation earlier than expected. By showing the truth before the final act, the film stopped being a mystery and became a study of obsession and control. Instead of guessing along with Scotty, audiences watched him struggle in ignorance while already knowing what Judy had done. This shift turned her from a typical femme fatale into a more layered character, one burdened with guilt and remorse. Some critics felt the decision ruined the suspense, while others believed it gave the story far more depth. Ever since the film's release in 1958, people have remained split, arguing over whether the early reveal was a mistake or a stroke of genius. In time, many came to see it as one of the most daring techniques in movie history, a choice that helped make Vertigo a masterpiece. The controversy deepened with the so-called letter scene. In this moment, Judy sat down to write a confession that explained how Madeline's death had been staged. Hitchcock originally kept the scene because he felt it helped the audience understand Judy's fear and guilt as she reunited with Scotty. But after test screenings, he began to doubt himself. Worried it gave away too much, he cut the scene entirely before release. Samuel A. Taylor later admitted they had made a mistake, saying that after the earlier musical scene, it would have been the perfect time to explain Judy's secret. He called the letter sequence weak, but still believed removing it was worse. For Hitchcock, this was a rare crisis of confidence. Known for giving audiences information so they could feel the tension grow, he instead chose to hold back, and it nearly weakened the entire film. Even the actors were caught up in the battles over the edit. James Stewart, who played Scotty, shocked producer Herbert Coleman with his indifference. Coleman had fought hard to protect Hitchcock's original vision, but Stewart brushed him off, saying, "The picture's not that important." It was a stunning comment from an actor who was starring in what would later be seen as one of the greatest films ever made. Coleman was furious, nearly resigning over the studio's cuts. The irony was that Hitchcock himself later admitted Stewart, at 49, may have been too old for the role, yet many critics still call it Stewart's finest performance. What made his dismissal even more remarkable was that the film would eventually be ranked #1 in the 2012 Sight and Sound poll of the greatest movies of all time. Stewart's remark showed how even major stars could completely misjudge the importance of the work they were part of. The film was almost destroyed entirely when Paramount head Barney Balaban stepped in. After seeing the original version with the reveal intact, Balaban was thrilled and returned to New York to promote it. But disaster struck when he accidentally showed critics a version missing the letter scene. The reaction was brutal. The same critics who had praised the full version now called it the worst film Hitchcock had ever made. Balaban was outraged. Coleman recalled that he thought the whole studio would be fired over the disaster. Furious, Balaban ordered the scene to be restored, demanding that Prince be recalled from theaters across the country and recut with new music. The expensive, last-minute rescue saved Vertigo from being dismissed and ensured that it would one day be remembered as Hitchcock's greatest work. Yet even with its later recognition, Vertigo has faced harsh criticism from feminist scholars. In 2012, the film was celebrated as the greatest ever made, but many argue that it portrays women in a deeply troubling way. A 2020 academic study examined how Hitchcock consistently depicted women as objects of desire rather than complex individuals. The research connected Vertigo to a pattern visible in his other films, from Rebecca in 1940 to Psycho in 1960, showing how women were repeatedly framed through a male-centered lens. The most disturbing example comes in the transformation scene, when Scotty forces Judy to become Madeleine again. Hitchcock admitted in an interview with François Truffaut that he intended the moment to symbolize a sexual act. To feminist critics, this confirmed their fears that the film turned female submission into erotic spectacle. Scotty's role as a detective already made him a kind of professional voyeur, and the camera itself joined in, lingering on Judy's reluctant transformation. Scholars argued this created not only Scotty's male gaze, but Hitchcock's own, making the audience complicit in the control of Judy's body. Kim Novak's casting added another layer to the problem. Critics long noted Hitchcock's fixation on cool, blonde heroines, and Novak became the perfect example. She later admitted in a 1996 interview with Roger Ebert that she felt pushed and pulled, told exactly what to wear, how to walk, and how to behave. She said she tried to resist in subtle ways, but the pressure was overwhelming. Critics have argued that Novak's treatment in the film mirrors her treatment in Hollywood itself, where women were often valued more as objects than as people. The story's ending only deepened the criticism. Judy's death followed what feminist scholars called a dangerous pattern in Hitchcock's work, where insecure men punished women for their supposed faults. The tragedy was dressed up as noble or romantic, but it still left the woman destroyed, while the man's obsession was never fully questioned. Analysts connected this to Freudian ideas of male insecurity, where the female body itself became a source of fear and anxiety. Instead of exploring Scotty's toxic behavior, the film made Judy's fate seem inevitable. Years later, biographer Donald Spoto revealed that Hitchcock's treatment of women on set was often just as troubling as the stories he told on screen. He detailed Hitchcock's controlling relationships with actresses, especially Tippi Hedren, during the making of The Birds and Marnie. Novak herself confirmed that the pressure was real, saying she felt constantly directed in every detail of her life during filming. Critics believe this proves that the misogyny in Vertigo was not only a matter of style, but a reflection of Hitchcock's personal behavior. Alfred Hitchcock's Vertigo is one of the most remarkable stories in film history. When it was first released in 1958, it earned just $3.2 million in North American rentals and ranked only 14th at the box office that year. At the time, many considered it a disappointment, but the movie's journey was far from over. Over the decades, it transformed from a modest performer into what many critics now call the greatest film ever made. Its story is filled with rediscoveries, restorations, and critical re-evaluations that changed its place in cinema forever. The turning point came in 1983 when Vertigo was brought back to theaters after being locked away since 1973. Hitchcock himself had pulled 5 of his films from circulation a decade earlier. No one expected much from the re-release, yet the film shocked everyone by earning $5,343,461 domestically. In its first week alone, it brought in $91,000 from 4 cinemas in New York, $50,000 from 4 cinemas in Los Angeles, $35,000 in San Francisco, and $19,000 in Philadelphia. The film's 1983 to 1984 reissue earned $2.5 million in rentals. Combined with the other 4 Hitchcock films in the package deal, the collection earned about $50 million for Universal, with 30% of that going to the Hitchcock estate. It was a complete resurrection, proving that a film once seen as a disappointment could find a second life if released at the right time. The next great chapter came in 1996, when Universal Pictures approved a restoration project that cost $1 million and took 36 months to complete. The restoration was led by James C. Katz and Robert A. Harris, who faced extraordinary challenges. They discovered that the original soundtrack elements had been deliberately destroyed in 1967 on orders from Hitchcock's team to save storage costs. The restoration crew became detectives, tracking down missing film elements in the United States, Germany, Italy, and Spain. Their attention to detail was astonishing. They even tracked down a sample of the exact green paint used on Kim Novak's Jaguar, so the color would be perfectly matched. The result was new 35mm and 65mm negatives created on polyester stock, designed to last for hundreds of years without fading. When the restored version premiered in October 1996 at the Castro Theater in San Francisco, with both Kim Novak and Patricia Hitchcock attending, the response was overwhelming. The film earned $148,000 from just 2 cinemas in 8 days and went on to bring in $800,000 from 8 cinemas in 4 weeks. By the end of its run, the restored version grossed $1.86 million. Audiences had proven they were willing to pay premium prices to see a properly restored classic on the big screen. Even before this restoration, the film had already been recognized for its cultural importance. In 1989, it was one of the very first 25 films chosen for the National Film Registry, an honor reserved for works considered culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. At the time, this was a bold choice because Vertigo was still often ranked behind Psycho and North by Northwest. But this recognition came just 4 years before the major restoration began, giving it powerful institutional support. It showed remarkable foresight, and it played a crucial role in preparing the way for the film's reevaluation. Over the decades, Vertigo continued to find new audiences through multiple re-releases. The 1983 theatrical return brought in $5.3 million. The 1996 restoration added $1.86 million more. Its home video journey began the same year with a video cassette release priced at $59.98. It quickly achieved gold certification by selling over 50,000 copies, earning another $3 million. The DVD era brought several versions, including a release in March 1998, a spot in the Alfred Hitchcock Essentials collection in October 2011, and a Blu-ray in September 2012 as part of the Masterpiece collection. A standalone Blu-ray appeared in May 2014. The film received a 4K restoration in October 2014, again shown at the Castro Theater. That version refined the sound and credited the original restorers, Harris and Katz. In September 2020, the film was released on Ultra HD Blu-ray as part of the Alfred Hitchcock Classics collection, followed by a Steelbook edition in September 2021. Each new release brought the film to fresh audiences and added more to its commercial legacy. In 1984, a double feature of Rear Window and Vertigo in New York earned $14,200 in its first week, showing that even creative pairings could spark interest. The greatest recognition came in 2012, when the British Film Institute's Sight and Sound poll declared Vertigo the greatest film ever made. For 50 years, that title had belonged to Citizen Kane. In 2002, Vertigo had finished just 5 votes behind. But in 2012, it received 34 more votes than Citizen Kane, with 846 critics, distributors, and academics participating. The timing matched perfectly with the British Film Institute's Genius of Hitchcock season. It was a stunning reversal that showed critics now valued psychological depth and visual innovation as much as traditional storytelling. In 2022, the film held its place near the top, finishing in second, proving its position was no fluke. The The film's power comes from the endless ways it can be interpreted. Some critics believe the entire story is a dream Scotty has while hanging from the rooftop at the start. They point to the surreal visual style, the symbolic dream sequence, and the impossible elements of the plot. Others believe Scotty discovered Gavin Elster's murder scheme early and chose to play along, making him less a victim and more of a manipulator. Another reading focuses on the idea of the perfect crime. Gavin Elster's plan not only kills his wife, but leaves Scotty psychologically destroyed. He loses his fellow officer, then Madeleine, and finally Judy. The crime's success is measured not just in execution, but in the devastation it leaves behind. For many, the film works as a psychological metaphor rather than a simple thriller. Scotty's fear of heights mirrors his inability to handle emotional extremes. The towering sequoias at Muir Woods and the bell tower both serve as symbols of life, death, and the human struggle with loss. The green of Madeleine's dress and the red of the restaurant walls carry symbolic meaning about life, passion, and obsession. The movie reflects grief, guilt, obsession, and the longing for redemption. More than 65 years after its release, Vertigo still feels alive. Its dolly zoom effect, first used in 1958 by cameraman Erman Roberts, has influenced filmmakers from Steven Spielberg to Brian De Palma. Modern audiences continue to find new meanings, whether in its exploration of toxic masculinity, its commentary on obsession, or its haunting portrayal of love and loss. Film scholar John Charest noted that every viewing offers new interpretations, which is why it continues to hold up 66 years later. The film remains a mystery, a study, a romance, and a tragedy all at once, ensuring its place as one of the greatest works in cinema.